Hello, and thank you for joining me. My name is Amelie, and I am the creator and founder of Celestic Intelligence, and I am also the host of the Celestic Intelligence podcast. This is a teaching today on empathy. Yesterday, we were talking about the dark side of empathy, where you collapse into others instead of holding into yourself, which is huge. I think we don't quite understand how deep this goes and how much it can fracture your identity and other things. So I strongly encourage you to listen to yesterday's stream. Today we are doing a teaching from the Social and Emotional Intelligence Institute on empathy. It's quite a big it's quite a big chapter, so we'll see if I get through all of it. But I want to talk about, just because how big it is, I might have to make it a couple. Yeah, this is several pages. So I just have a printout that I'll be reading from so that we can kind of talk about that. So, yesterday I did talk about dark empathy. Hi, Mike. Thank you for joining, as per always. So, what is empathy? So, empathy is, as defined by the Social and Emotional Intelligence organization, is sensing others' feelings and perspectives, taking an active interest in their concerns, and the ability to put yourself in another's place and take that perspective into account in your relationship with that person. Okay? So, sensing others' feelings and perspectives, a lot of us might have a really strong connection with that. We might have really high empathy, while others may have really low empathy. They're not able to really sense others' feelings or perspectives. And yesterday, as you know, I almost went live to talk about it, but I didn't have my phone with me. I was on a walk, and sometimes when I'm on a walk, that's when these ideas come into my head. But I started thinking about all the corporate leaders, like the big billionaire corporate leaders, and how they're able to get to a point where they can manage so many people. And when I say manage, just kind of oversee in these big, large corporations, I'm talking, thousands of employees underneath them. So let's say they're like CEO, Bezos isn't anymore, but Jassy of Amazon is responsible not only for that CEO position, but responsible for the whole well being of the company. Same with Elon Musk. Same with, any large corporate leader. They have tons of people underneath them. To get to that position, I was really trying to embody and really have some empathy towards what would it be like to have so much responsibility for other people underneath me, while still, thinking about certain stakeholders like investors, people who hold stock in the company, and also the teams and employees that I'm managing, and also the customer, the clientele, making sure that they're satisfied so that the health and well-being of the company is positive. I mean, that is, you're upholding certain principles or certain foundational practices in that position. So I'm like, well, because I do understand that, empathy, or just being an egoist, is this extreme form of empathy where it's really dark. You don't hold a lot of yourself in the empathy unless you're able to kind of bring in some of those, not that narcissistic traits are all negative, but bring in some of those to like counteract and balance between the extremes of narcissism and egoism. So, when looking at empathy, I would think that you would have to have a little less empathy to make some of the decisions that are being made. So, I'm writing a book, and in my book, I'm writing about, different things that are going wrong with leadership and development, and the way that information is being fed. How do we instill practical emotional and social intelligence into the business world while still maintaining the the objectives of revenue and profit and loss, and making sure that those are all well, and also retaining top talent. The empathy piece, the vulnerability as a leader, is going to be very important. And this goes beyond business. I mean, if you don't have strong emotional and social intelligence, it's going to be difficult when things get really hard to connect with others because of being isolated and alone. Now, yesterday I did mention, I'm reading this book, and they brought up a really good point that loneliness is really, really terrible for your health. So if you're feeling lonely, and depression and anxiety and all that stuff, those those markers, those statistics are up since the pandemic in particular. So post pandemic, a lot of people are still struggling to like reconnect with, how do I connect with my community? That put a really big deep fracture in our connection with others. So when we're looking at the idea of the competency of empathy, I would think that, not being too far into empathy, still maintaining these boundaries is important. So let's talk about what people with this competency, what kind of markers are there. So one is they are attentive to and able to attune to a wide range of emotional signals. So what does that mean? Like, do you have to know exactly what's going on in yourself all the time? Not necessarily. Sometimes empathy, especially when you get towards this really extreme egoism function, this egoism energy, you're feeling other people's feelings or concerns, and you're putting it ahead of yours, because if they're satisfied, they won't pay attention to you. So it's almost this freeze technique that is a survival technique. If they don't pay attention to me, if they don't see me, so think about if you were out in the woods and a saber-toothed tiger is after you, going back to the basics. Saber-toothed tiger is after you, so you're detecting like, I'm being prowled, and your the physiological reactions that you're going to have is to once to stop breathing or breathe really lightly so you're not heard, to freeze in position and scan the area to see, where is the threat, is it detectable. And so in going into that, sometimes we take that energy of that saber-toothed tiger scenario, and the people that we're around, if they're perceived as a threat, we go into that stop breathing, and then look around, because our body is in that survival mode, that survival threat scanning mechanism that we have. So they're looking at, they're attentive to and able to attune to a wide range of emotional signals. So you can do this this is obviously in a positive way of being able to sense, is my team, is my family, is my partner, are my friends, are they feeling satisfied, or is there some dissatisfaction that's happening? The next the next marker is listen for and sense the felt but unspoken emotions in a person or in a group of people. So you're able to listen for and sense what is being unspoken, the unspoken emotions. Like, remember when I was talking about entrainment. Entrainment is being able to, like within 2 minutes of going into a meeting with a group of people in your company, you can have a sense of what the emotions are in there. Okay. Now, if it's a meeting to announce something exciting, there might be a little bit of excitement in the room. There might be a lot of talking and laughing and joking and everything like that. However, if you're going into a meeting and you know that there's been some poor performances of the company that you're in, and there's a chance that they might announce like layoffs or restrictions or other things like that, you might be able to attune into that if you have high empathy. The next one is showing sensitivity to and understanding others' perspectives and feelings. So when you have high empathy, you can walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. They say moccasins, but you can walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. You have a certain sensitivity to how that other person is feeling, what their perspectives might be. Maybe they're saying something and it's like kind of painting this picture. They might be complaining about something. They might be just, making these remarks about something. And so you can understand and feel their perspective because you have that high sensitivity to them. And then finally, the last one is they're able to help the other person or group based on accurate understanding of their needs and their feelings. So this obviously is a two-way street. You might be able to, connect with somebody and have an accurate understanding of what they're going through. So let's say somebody's complaining about, you know, they're complaining about the coffee situation in, maybe the coffee maker's broken and they're just like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. Like, we usually have free coffee and it's not available. You can understand their feelings and maybe take a, yeah, fight or flight. Yes. You can take, yeah, from those meetings. You can definitely get an accurate understanding of their needs. They need coffee, right? They might feel tired or exhausted. Maybe they had a late light night last night and or couldn't sleep. So that is what people with this competency will look like. People lacking this competency might be very quick to stereotype others. So because they're unable to feel into somebody else's situation, they might just stereotype, oh, you're this, you're that, based on the things that they're seeing and based on their biases that they have within themselves. People lacking this competency show no understanding or misunderstand or are surprised by other people's feelings or actions. They don't understand why somebody put their notice in to quit a job. They have no empathy. They don't know what it's like to work in that person's position. Maybe that person has, they have one role, but they're taking on two. They often come into conflict. So people lacking empathy are quick to be a part of conflicts. Okay. They cannot read people and what they are thinking and feeling. So their awareness for others is very low, and their empathy of understanding what that person's going through is very low. They can't read people. They can't read the room. They don't know what people are thinking or feeling. Maybe they're talking about something, and somebody with high empathy can say, that person is talking about something and it's making everybody in the room very uncomfortable. And they just keep going because they can't read the room. Okay. And maybe that's, when somebody with high empathy can come in and say, the conversation is making people uncomfortable. Is there Are you seeing that, just to kind of raise awareness to that person? Empathy is, it's not something that you're just born with. Empathy is a learned experience, or it's a learned competency. So just keep that in mind. Like, even people with low empathy can raise their levels of empathy. People lacking this competency tend to act without considering how others might feel about something. So they tend to act without considering how others might feel about something. So instead of, when they take an action, they won't see they won't see the effect of what that action is. I I was researching for the last couple days, because I'm adding it into my book, but Elon Musk making a couple, decisions, and then another for one for Tesla, and then another for X, Twitter, when he bought Twitter. Acted without empathy. Okay, there was little vulnerability. Acted without empathy. So the in 2019, I think he sent out a memo that said, you know, we're cutting jobs. We can only keep the top performers. And so, people are going to get cut. And he just did that. And a lot of people reacted, obviously, because that was a new threat that was on the horizon. Am I going to get cut? And what kind of things am I going to need to do? It's a normal response to something like that. Okay. If somebody is like, we're going to have to reduce the staff so we have a skeleton crew. It's been something that's been said for a long time. People are talking about, we work on a skeleton crew, we work on a skeleton crew. Okay, well, you're going to get skeletons, because really what you're doing is grinding the labor flesh of your employees. But that happened in Tesla. And so, there was some obvious objectives that he wanted to carry out. But in the way that it was done, it was an email memo done at midnight or 1 a.m. or something like that, like in the middle of the night, sent out. So in the morning, there's just this pulse of surprise by all these other people. I thought it was because it only took a fraction of the people to actually run X or Twitter. Well, for Twitter, for X, so when Twitter was purchased, it was another midnight email of, it was an ultimatum. It wasn't the fraction of people. And, probably that could have happened, but the way that it was rolled out was basically a shock to the system. It was like dropping a bomb on the business. So essentially what happened was at, midnight or whatever, Elon sent out an email and said, if you don't want to be a part of this vision, I'm paraphrasing, if you don't want to be a part of this X vision or Twitter vision, you have until 5 p.m. Pacific time tomorrow, be a part of this extreme hardcore vision that we have for Twitter. Now, if it took a fraction of the people to actually run Twitter, that's one thing. But the way that it was done, it did some permanent damage. One, the reputation of Twitter shifted. It doesn't matter that they call it X. It shifted. 33 million users left the Twitter site, and they haven't gone back to the number valuation that the company was before it was purchased. So it still is underperforming profit wise as a company, because what happened was all of these people mass exodused. So you had 1,200 people leave Twitter overnight, and the rest of the people were there they were scrambling to keep the company together, trying to learn systems, because all of that knowledge, all of that knowledge, I guess is the best way to say it, just left, and the people that were sticking around, if they felt uncomfortable about it, then, they probably did. That's probably a good experience of like their feelings about that. But the damage was done. They lost 10 to 15 billion dollars alone just in the valuation of the company, not to mention the people that don't want to work with X anymore. And so you just have these hardcore people that likely are questioning, should I keep my boundaries or not? Am I going to enter a job market that's, it's been an interesting job market. I have my opinions about it. So those two actions, though, are just a way to demonstrate, like, some of these billionaires, especially that are running these, large companies, are acting without considering how others might feel about it. Okay. And the long term situation of what happens after that. People lacking this competency, just going to the last one, come across as indifferent or uncaring. So, there is this like element of not caring about the situation, about the indifference to the effects of what their decisions or their actions will have on others. That just demonstrates a low empathy ability. Now, when developing empathy, listening is the key to empathy. So quiet your mind, still the inner clamor, and deeply listen to the other person's needs. So just really like pausing, stopping all the voices in your own head, and really just paying attention to what the other person's saying. And then listening for other cues of what emotions or actions are occurring as well. So you listen to the other person's needs. So maybe they need to be respected, or maybe they need to be included, or maybe they need to be acknowledged. These are all things that somebody that has empathy is going to be able to do. Now, if you're thinking about a leader and what kind of a leader you would like, you want somebody that will acknowledge you for, your contributions and the things that you do really well. And then you also want to be respected by that person. They give you respect, you respect them. There's like this symbiotic relationship. And then to be included. Nobody wants to be excluded. Like, being excluded is like a huge trigger on the survival mechanism of your body. If you start to be excluded, your body senses it, and unless you're able to speak up about it, chances are it will like just eat you away until you're completely burnt out. And we talked about that yesterday. That burnout, the exhaustion that just happens because you start to collapse when you start to be excluded. And it's, a very biological thing. Like, if you are part of a township or a tribal community and you got excommunicated or banished from that community, chances are you alone out there are going to die. We're very community oriented, particularly if your families come from more northern countries. So that's why ancestral knowledge of who you are, where your ancestors came from, is very important. Okay, moving on to another development tip is identifying underlying concerns that are not explicitly stated by others. So, I have really high empathy and I have really high social awareness, according to my frequency test that I did on my emotional intelligence or my emotional frequency test. And so tuning into others is like really easy for me. It's just immediate. And so I can kind of see some underlying things. I see when there's differences in actions, then when there's differences in behavior, when something is not, going in the way that is normal. I can identify it really quickly and it will cause me to really pause and think like what is going on with this person or what is going on in this group. This is what I sense and I'm going to speak up about it. I like to talk about, I had a friend, one of my coworkers who's my friend. He, usually comes into work and he would have his routine that he did. And one morning he came in and he wasn't that way, and I could tell something was off. And so I had to like pause what I was doing at work and go talk to him. And, it turns out he was having some marital issues, but I could sense it immediately, like something is off. What do I need to do to engage with that person to figure out, okay, is this something that I need to worry about? Like my system just kind of goes off. The same for, close family or even friends. Like I'll get just synchronistic thoughts of people and they'll come into my head, and until like I reach out to them and, say something, it's almost like my mind won't turn off. Okay, next is hear the emotions that accompany an expressed statement. So maybe there's a statement that somebody says, and you can kind of hear the underlying emotions in it, meaning that they might be saying it with, positively. And so they're really excited about the statements that they're making. Like maybe they got the job that they wanted, maybe they got the house that they wanted, maybe they got a huge sum of money, maybe they won the lottery. And so those, excited expressions of emotions will be in those. However, same thing for the negative ones. So you'll start to really tune in to how is this person feeling as they're talking with me in that moment. And so you're wanting to listen for those emotional cues. Now, the next one is listen when someone approaches you to express their feelings. Don't be busy. Don't be so busy you can't talk with the other person about what's important to them, and don't brush them off. When we're looking to connect and we're looking to build these deeper connections with people and, to establish really a lot stronger relationships, we want to listen when somebody is approaching us. And that might mean, hey, just give me a couple minutes and I'll be available for you. And then just being truly available and listening to what the other person is saying. Not being so busy in your mind that, you're doing all these other things and you're just kind of passively listening. I like to think of this, a lot of husbands are perceived as this on in entertainment, where like the wife is just gabbing, 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 gabbing. The husband's like, but not really listening, just nodding and letting her get it out, but not actively listening. So that does happen, but that's a brush off. That's a lack of empathy for, your partner. And so the same thing goes in the work environment, same thing goes in your friendship environment. If somebody is needing to share something, you want to be present and listen to what they're saying and remember stuff about that. So, if I find my mind starts wandering, I'll notice it and then I'll just kind of return back to, what the person is saying to me. I've got a lot of friends that, will call me and they'll just want to say all the things of what they're going through because they know that I'm going to be listening. I'm going to be listening for cues and to give the most soundest and wisest advice to them. And so that they come to me because I am an active listener, and that I show I care because I remember just certain things that they've said to me about it. The next thing is acknowledge what you think you've heard. So, paraphrasing or repeating back and clarifying the emotions you think you're hearing. Sounds like you're feeling frustrated. Sounds like you're pretty excited about this project. Those kind of things, just paraphrasing that, just repeating that back to the person shows that you were listening and that, you're accurately assessing their emotions. And that will, the more that you do that, the more you accurately assess the emotions of others based on listening, based on the information that you're receiving, the more connected they'll be with you. They'll know, okay, this person can be trusted when I share some really vulnerable things with them. They hear what I'm saying, and so that trust can be built there, right? And then lastly, withhold your judgments. When tempted to criticize or dismiss the opinions of others, stop. Step back and consider on an emotional level as well as a cognitive level what the other person might be experiencing and what merits another's point of view may have. So this one is interesting. There's a lot of people that don't want to hear criticism or be dismissed in their opinions. And because I have such high empathy, even people that get into altercations with me, the I was kind of fighting with ChatGPT about it because I was talking about a situation that happened at work. One of the managers got really super frustrated with me and full on yelled at me. I can't remember what he said, but obviously it made me feel very unsafe. And so I just left the room. And it was a toxic work environment. And so, I was like, okay, stepping back from this, obviously, I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling put under the gun and all this stuff. And in listening to, not necessarily the anger, but the frustration on that manager's end, my mind went to that person's having marital issues. They, moved a great distance to come work here. It's frustrating to work here for myself as well as them. And so they're experiencing a lot of pressure and stress. I'm experiencing a lot of pressure and stress. And so this interaction happened. Now, did it really get resolved? I don't think so. But that's, in itself, it's not, that's in the past. But we both had jobs to do. We were both trying to get the jobs done. And in doing so, it just caused a lot of friction between our departments. He didn't want to do things that I wanted to do and wasn't buying into that. So, and there wasn't really any solid leadership or vision in that. So remember, when you're catalyzing change and you're having inspirational leadership, you need both of those things to really bring on these new ideas and play them out. The frustrating thing is, like, when ideas get started and then they fizzle out, and that happened quite a bit because there was nobody there to really baby the changes that needed to be made. Okay. I'm not going to go through all of these. I have 28%. But I do want to talk about some definitions. So, and then we'll talk about, what we're listening for, because I think that's important. Okay. So let's just look at the definition of empathy. So, perceive the internal frame of reference of another with accuracy and with the emotional components and meanings which pertain thereto as if one were the person. So, really putting yourself as if you were them. Okay? Thus, it means to sense the hurt or the pleasure of another as they sense it, and to perceive the causes thereof as they perceive them. but without losing the recognition that it is as if I were hurt or pleased and so forth. Okay? So this goes back into that egoism of feeling and sensing and perceiving what the other person might be going through is empathy. Not like sympathy, empathy. But you don't lose the recognition of yourself, right? We still have boundaries to protect ourselves from that. And some people are very much more sensitive than others are to the energies around them. And then the other definition can be a sense of similarity in feelings experienced by the self and the other without confusion between the two individuals. Okay? So there's no confusion. You're both sensing similarity of feelings, but each one has their own feelings they're experiencing. And that was Jean Decity. The first one was Carl Rogers. Now, D.M. Berger defines empathy as the capacity to know emotionally what is the another is experiencing from within the frame of experience of that other person, and the capacity to sample the feelings of another or put oneself in another's shoes. So we kind of talked about that. The distinction between empathy and other concepts. So empathy is not sympathy. So sympathy is, I'm sorry for your sadness and I want to help in some way. How can I comfort you? Remember, sympathy, I kind of talked about the comfort care. Sympathy is just being, I'm really sorry for your sadness. Like there's no empathy. It just is action. How can I help you? How can I give you some relief? Now, pity is things are bad for you. You seem as though you need help. So there's no empathy, there's no feeling, there's no connection of feelings or perception of what that person might be going through. I read a really interesting thing on, I'm Northern Arapaho of Wyoming tribe, and there was an interesting thing about pity. Now, when somebody comes in to your home or somebody asks for help, you're not to turn them away. And part of that is because of that tribal connection. Remember, I was talking about for many millennia, we have been pretty tribal or like a part of a township or something like that. And so pity is seeing somebody that's down and then offering help. Okay. Things are bad for you. You seem as though you need help. How can I help you? Emotional contagion is the distinction between this and empathy is you feel sad and now I feel sad. Okay. The emotional contagion is I feel sad because now you're sad. I feel happy because you're happy. I feel joy because you're feeling joy. This is the emotional contagion is like the mirror neurons that are working in our system or the entrainment that is working in our nervous systems to experience the feelings of others. So we can embody the feelings of others because emotional contagion allows for that. And because the emotions, we tune into them immediately when we walk into a room of people. Now, so you feel sad, now I feel sad. That's the emotional contagion. Now, empathy is I feel your sadness. Okay, I feel your sadness. Apathy is I don't care how you feel. Okay, and telepathy is I read your sadness without you expressing it to me in any normal way. Okay, like Robin Williams, I don't know. There's like a thing about most comedians, like most comedians are there. It's like this flight response of see how funny I am, but don't see how I feel. Don't feel how I feel. They have this, there's this really interesting way. So telepathy is I read your sadness without you expressing anything that shows that you're expressing that to me. So you're reading behind like these unseen messages. All right. So those are the distinctions. And so moving on to the 3 stages of emotional and empathetic maturity. So looking at Olson from 2001, stage 1 is the most primitive pattern not common in adults. Stage 1, empathetic maturity. This persons at this stage are fundamentally different, see others as fundamentally different from themselves. The rationale for others' actions, feelings, or thoughts are not experienced as having a human relevance in the sense that one's own rationale do. Those operating at this stage perceive mutuality with others concretely. Okay? So they're not really super connected with one another. Now, at stage 2, people hold their rationale for behavior is valid for everyone. Okay, their reasons for behavior feelings are legitimate only to the degree they coincide with the person at step 2. So, persons in step 2 might see others like them as long as they make sense in their world. Okay. Positive regard for a sufferer is perceived to be participating in negative behavior difficult for the person in stage 2, unless explicably different from his or her point of view. So an example is negative behavior would be yeah, I don't want to share that example. So the person in step 2 is really looking at their rationale only. They're not looking at others' rationale. They're looking at their rationale only. So their biases, their schemas that they have in their own mind are taking them to, whatever stereotype or whatever limited understanding they have based on their own experience. Okay. So they might look at Elon's, his interaction with his businesses as normal. Okay. He was making business decisions for that business, and so it makes sense. Or maybe there's some sort of political strategy that went behind a decision that they're like, oh, that political strategy that makes sense to me. So they're not really going super far deep past their own experience, past their own rationale. They're only able to go up to their own rationale. So stage 1, it's very primitive. They don't have any any rationale to go off of. They're not operating with others, and they're likely not operating within themselves. So stage 2 goes up to, what is my rationale? What is my experience? And how does that apply to what I'm doing? Now, stage 3, empathy occurs prior to and without regard for any judgment about the person's behavior. So this is a little bit further. Now, this goes beyond your rationale. Now you're looking at what others are experiencing, and if the sufferer is responsible or not responsible for whatever that situation is. So a hallmark for this is a person's ability to perceive another empathetically while simultaneously and without apparent contradiction perceiving that the other is responsible for their behavior. Okay. So that one goes a little bit beyond their own rationale. They're seeing a little bit more of the whole interaction play out. This becomes a lot easier when you're able to accurately assess your own emotions. You're accurately able to assess your own emotions, and now you can apply that rationale from like the stage 2 era to others. And then beyond that, once you get to stage 3, now you're able to go even deeper into that empathetic connection with another. And see, okay, that emotion is presenting, let's say it's anger. That person appears angry. Why are they angry? And are they responsible for that emotion and that behavior that comes out of that or not? So when you're coaching either yourself or another in empathy, you want to do it from obviously a place where you're demonstrating that, because that makes it so much easier. As with the mirror neurons, it makes it so much easier for people to be empathetic when they're seeing it demonstrated. So, listening is the very first part of empathy. So, from an emotional intelligence standpoint, you want to listen for the other person's emotional state and have some sort of sensitivity to what that other person is feeling as the first step. So, actively listening, really just putting all the work down, setting aside time that you will not be distracted to actively listen to what that person is going through. This can work with your kids, this can work with your partner. Maybe you guys are having several disagreements and you're just like, we're not seeing eye to eye. How can I show up for them to have them feel seen and heard and respected while still maintaining my own boundaries? Okay. So listening is that first step. Then understanding is the second step, what that person might be feeling or experiencing in the moment. Think of it not just emotionally, but also cognitively. Like, what is their rationale? Why are they perceiving it this way? I see it a completely different way, but they're seeing it from this point of view. So how can we expand that so that we can come to an agreement or work through that difficult emotion? And finally, verbally expressing. So the last concept is to communicate that back to them. So communicating and acknowledging their perception of the internal frame of reference of another, and sensing similarity of feelings. So if that person is happy, you can say, wow, remember, it was really simple. It was like, oh, I can see that you're really happy, or I sense that, this is a great promotion for you. Excellent. So, empathy is the capacity to know emotionally what the other is experiencing and being able to express and communicate it, our own feelings of empathy. Wow, that promotion, that really looks like you've worked so hard to get there. I'm really excited for you to see where, you take this next role. Okay. So it's really just connecting with them in that way. So when we're enhancing these relationships, we want to express verbally and through our own body language, tone, or even in our actions, that we understand and acknowledge and share the experience and the feelings with that other person that we're connecting with. Okay. Just moving along, because like I said, this is a long chapter. But the next one is when we are practicing empathy, we want to make sure that we're not crossing lines and doing things where it might be a little too far. So make sure that, if you're going to be working on this, that you're working on your own internal accurate emotional assessments. So really becoming familiar. I shared the emotions wheel yesterday. Okay. And we can look at checklists. You can look at the emotions wheel. I personally like the emotions wheel because it's color coded, and each main feeling has, I can either go from the outside in or from the inside out and really assess accurately what emotion am I feeling. And the more that you get used to seeing these emotions and really understanding each emotional state, maybe you think that you're one way and then you look at the emotions wheel or you look at emotional checklist and you're like, oh, actually, I'm not feeling that way. I'm feeling this way. Helps to, really hone in on that accuracy that you really want to get to. Instead of just saying, I'm angry, you might say, I'm livid. I'm livid. Or I'm offended. Tempting fate and driving on E. I mean, it keeps life interesting. Maybe you're feeling stressed. Maybe uncertainty is activating anger feelings. Uncertainty is a little bit more fearful, but maybe the fear and anger are both, working together. You might feel devastated. Let's look at some happy ones. Might feel blissful. I know that I can feel blissful quite often, especially when like new ideas and new concepts are coming in. Maybe you're feeling resilient. Okay. Feeling like, man, I can do anything. Just floating around, feeling good. Maybe you're feeling, let's see, another nice one. Tranquil, just so peaceful. Harmonious, happy, hopeful, peaceful. I mean, once we start to really put these words into our vocabulary, it becomes really helpful to help assess others and really deepen into our empathy with one another. Okay? So, really getting in touch with your own feelings, and then being able to have boundaries around really feeling into the other person. Sometimes that can feel a little penetrating for the other person. You might say, "Oh, I noticed that you're feeling this." They might become offended by that. Get away from me. I'm just want to be on my own right now. I don't want people coming into my energy field and whatever. Honor the fact that, you still need to consent, get consent from the other person. You know, a lot of the times you want to wait for them to come and initiate that conversation with you. People can also be extremely needy. They might have some deep unmet emotional needs, and they will have these defense mechanisms, like I said. And so when you attempt to unblock that pain, it might bring on something that is more than you're able to handle. So that's why when you're an HR professional, or you're a coach, or anybody that is like any leadership role where you're, going into lines that could be crossed, you really want to be sensitive to, am I, one, getting consent from this person, or am I pulling out information just because I want to acknowledge the information that I'm getting? Or do I want to, wait for them to approach me? Maybe I might have to develop a relationship with my team members and really get to a place where they're sharing that with me. All right. Now, as a leader, you don't want to sit there and listen to their whole extremely painful, traumatic childhood stuff and or their adolescence where they were struggling and suffering. There's a time and a place for it. And, um, as somebody, if you're reporting, if they're your direct report, you don't want to sit there and be their therapist. Okay. So being empathetic and being a therapist are two different things. They may sound similar, but being empathetic is just saying, wow, I sense that you're feeling this way. I, feel really sad for you. Is there anything I can do to help support you? We have, maybe help you find some resources to get you through that situation so that it's something that you can put behind you and rewrite that story. Maybe you can empathize with them and say, I've been through some of these painful feelings that you felt as a child, and I'm also working through those things too. Do you want to hear what I've done to get through that? Maybe that might help you. You don't want to necessarily fix, but you want to help just show them that, hey, you're not alone. I feel and I sense what your experiences were. And I'm, acknowledging it. And also, I'm not taking it on. I'm not taking it on. I have a boundary here that I'm not going to be your therapist. Okay. Well, I think I kind of covered empathy this week. It is a huge one. It's not the only one that is a part of emotional intelligence. And it is important when you're working on connecting with others that you get into this state where you can truly be empathetic and not let yourself get run over. So when we're looking at empathy as far as the quadrants of emotional and social intelligence, this is awareness of others. So this sits with situational or organizational awareness. So empathy is really just awareness of others, and it fits into this other category. But there's also service ethic that goes into it as an emotional competency, and situational and organizational awareness that go into this competency quadrants. This is not management of others. This is just awareness of others, okay? So that concludes my teaching. I can't believe I got it done in less than an hour today. It was kind of a long one. Quick question. Why do you think now people need mental health days, but back in the day it wasn't needed? So there's a lot of things that are going on. Back in the day, we didn't have social media. Back in the day, we didn't have all these digital devices. You didn't have all this technology. And so now, and we didn't have the level of entertainment that we have now. We didn't have it's a completely different environment. We didn't have the level of gaming that we have now. I mean, we're looking at some pretty deep extremes here of what life was like back then. I mean, my son and I, we were watching Good Burger with Keenan and Kel and Sinbad. It came out in 1997, and they still had these thick cell phones. This is before cell phones were a thing. I mean, I don't think cell phones were a big thing until about 2000, 2001. So this is a few years before that. And so the technology really wasn't there. I mean, we were still kind of relying on these simple environments to go through. Now, was mental health needed? Yeah, probably. I mean, people were still going through it, but I think just with the change of energy in our universe, just the shifting of energy from generations, that now mental health is like kind of coming into focus. So it's a cyclical thing, it shifts, and so we're just there now. But because of all of the access to digital technology, all of the constant environment stimulation, that really fractures people's minds. So things like it's like an MK Ultra basically. So if you've been watching the digital age investigation that I've been doing, it's because of all of this stimulation, that constant stimulation, the no off time or the disconnection from people. It really causes this fracture in the mind of how am I connecting. That's why I started my work, is to help combine these things for a whole somatic experience. So Scholastic Intelligence is basically developing techniques of how do I get into wholeness with myself and then operate from a place of wholeness so that others can experience that as well. But a lot of it is the digital stuff. A lot of it is the addition of gaming and VR, and still having the whole experience of a human that we did before, but then now adding in these digital interfaces that we're experiencing. And it's only going to get a little bit more crazy unless we can really dial it in and get a working model that will help our nervous systems integrate responsibly with the other stuff. But anyways, I'll probably come on later tonight. I've been trying to get my friend to come on, and we're trying to figure out a good way to do that, to do like a live stream and talk about his experience. If you have not yet and you've made it this far, please consider getting a pre-order of my book, The $8 Truth Exposing a $380 billion Lie. This is the future playbook of well-being workplaces and the answer to help end toxic workplaces. So this has been a passion project for me, to help people really come back into wholeness. Obviously, it starts with me. This is something that I'm interested in and a part of my own personal mastery walk. And so I love to have people that feel encouraged on that as well to get themselves a copy. It's only $5 pre-order before it launches on October 8th. And it is a digital copy. So please consider that. I'll put the link into the comments, and I will see you guys later. I hope you have a wonderful day. Happy hump day. I think it's hump day today. And take care. All right. Cheers.